So 26 cars lining up on the dummy grid. They go off for their final warm-up lap before the start of this 69-lap race. And once again, we have the two McLarens at the front. Ayrton Senna on pole, Alain Prost second fastest to fifth of a second slower. The two Ferraris are on the second row, Gerhard Berger and Michele Alboreto. On row 3, Alessandro Nannini in the normally aspirated Benetton and Nelson Piquet in the Lotus Honda. Row 4, Thierry Boutsen with the Benetton, Eddie Cheever with the Arrows. Row 5, Nigel Mansell's Williams, and Philip Streff qualifying a very strong 10th in the AGS. Row 6, Riccardo Patrese with his Williams, and Andrea De Cesaris with the Real, also well up. On the 7th row, Satoru Nakajima in the Lotus Honda, and Ivan Capelli with the March. And on row 8, Stefano Modena qualifying well with the Eurobrunn, and Derek Warwick starting from the 16th grid position in the spare Arrows. Row 9, Filipe Alio's Lola, and Mauricio Gugelmin, there he is in the picture now, with the March with its Judd engine. Now the 26 cars lined up. As always, we have the normal starting procedure of a red light and then a green. Everybody goes on the green. Ayrton Senna on the left of your picture, Alain Prost slightly back from him on the outside of the staggered grid. There is the red light. Now we have a green. Everybody moves. Alain Prost makes a very strong start and goes up alongside Ayrton Senna. I think it is Prost who made the better start. There was quite a lot of bumping and boring on the grid, but it is indeed Alain Prost who comes out at the head of the queue. Two McLarens, two Ferraris, two Benettons. It's Prost leading from Senna. Then in third place it's Berger from Alboreto. Those are the two Ferraris. Then it's Thierry Boutsen who is the better placed of the two Benettons, with his teammate Alessandro Nannini immediately behind him. And the next car up is the Lotus of Nelson Piquet, the world champion, and he's got behind him his former teammate in the Williams Judd, Nigel Mansell. So this is the first of 69 laps, the field streaming away, already the two McLarens pulling away, but it's Gerhard Berger who seems to be the one man able to stay in contention with the two McLarens, because Berger is sitting on Ayrton Senna's tail. Michele Alboreto in fourth place, dropping back into the clutches of the two Benettons of Thierry Boutsen and Alessandro Nannini. Then it's Piquet, Mansell, Eddie Cheever, a very well placed Philip Streff, and Riccardo Patrese. And locking up a wheel there, that was the Lotus of Satoru Nakajima, losing a place to Filipe Alio in the Lola. Battles all the way down the field, although we understand there has been a collision on the grid between the Tyrrell of Julian Bailey and the Minardi of Sala, and we wait to see the result of that. But out in front, it's still Prost from Senna, from Berger, and then Alboreto, the two Benettons, the Lotus and the Williams of Nigel Mansell. Now remember, Ayrton Senna has been vanquished in the last two races by his teammate. Oh, there is Julian Bailey with a course car almost obliterating him from view. Julian Bailey with a clearly damaged Tyrrell. And there, without his rear wing, is the Spaniard Luis Sala with the Minardi. So Sala coming into the pits, no doubt to get a fresh wing, because his car looks otherwise healthy. But I suspect that Julian Bailey, driving in only his second Grand Prix with the Tyrrell, I suspect that his race is run. There's Berger, concentrating on trying to stay with these two mighty McLarens, and it has to be said that he's managing it. Berger clearly that little bit quicker at the moment than his Ferrari teammate Michele Alboreto, who isn't able to stay with the McLarens, and indeed now has his mirrors absolutely full of Thierry Boutsen with the Benetton. But we were just saying that Ayrton Senna, having been vanquished by Alain Prost for the last two races, is very anxious to redress the balance. It's Alain Prost who's leading the World Championship at the moment. It's Alain Prost who seems to be establishing himself as the leader in this superstar team. So Prost, Senna, Berger. There's Gerhard Berger in third place in the Ferrari. Fourth is Alboreto, fifth is Boutsen, sixth is Alessandro Nannini, seventh is Nelson Piquet, and eighth is Nigel Mansell. It hasn't been an easy year for Ferrari. It really hasn't been an easy year for anybody in Grand Prix racing, apart from McLaren, who are making winning Grand Prix races look all too easy. There's the overall order at the end of 4 laps: the 2 McLarens, the 2 Ferraris, the 2 Benettons, the Lotus and the Williams. And Berger now is starting to lose touch a little bit with the McLarens. And Alboreto under real pressure now from Thierry Boutsen. And Berger trying very hard indeed. Then there you see the great puff of dust, because Berger put a wheel right over the edge there at a point where the cars are going quickly and there's absolutely no runoff area. Berger flinging his Ferrari into that tight right-hand hairpin. But now the McLarens just seem to have moved away and they're out of his touch. And Alboreto, no doubt, extremely worried about the attentions of both Boutsen and Nannini in the Ford-powered, normally aspirated Benettons. He would hope that the turbocharged power of his Ferrari would allow him to shake those Benettons off, but it doesn't seem to be so at the moment. Meanwhile, Ayrton Senna is starting to put very real pressure on Alain Prost. About a car's length between them, and there goes Boutsen. Thierry Boutsen goes past the Ferrari of Michele Alboreto to put his Benetton into 4th place. So it's McLaren, Ferrari, Benetton at this point. And Alain Prost, responding a little bit to the pressure, puts a little bit more daylight between himself and Ayrton Senna. But it's a long race, a long way to go, and there's always a worry here about fuel consumption for the turbocharged cars, which this year are not allowed to carry more than 150 litres of fuel. And on this circuit, where there's a lot of tight corners and long straights, a lot of accelerating up through the gears, the cars use up their fuel very quickly. And the thought is that the turbocharged cars may be very marginal on their fuel capacity. So Alain Prost will be worried not only about keeping Ayrton Senna behind him, but also about eking out his fuel to make sure it can last the race. He has a computer readout on his dashboard which tells him whether he's using his fuel too quickly or whether he's got a little bit in reserve, and he'll be watching that like a hawk. He'll also be watching his mirrors like a hawk to see where Ayrton Senna is going to attack. And we had a glimpse there of 2 Benettons running together. We've now got the Benettons in 4th and 5th places, because Alessandro Nannini has now passed Michele Alboreto. It's still McLaren 1 and 2, it's still Berger's Ferrari 3rd, but it's now Benetton's 4th and 5th, because Thierry Boutsen is 4th, Alessandro Nannini is 5th, and Michele Alboreto's Ferrari is pushed down to 6th place. This is Alain Prost. And there's Gerhard Berger in 3rd place. And the Benettons are winding him in now. Having disposed of his teammate Michele Alboreto, Thierry Boutsen and Alessandro Nannini have now set their sights on Gerhard Berger. And little by little, they're winding him in on this twisty circuit. Even though they have less power, their cars are clearly able to close on him on this twisty Gilles Villeneuve circuit. Into tight right-hander. And out again. Little glance in his mirror for Gerhard Berger, trying to work out what Thierry Boutsen's next move will be. Thierry Boutsen, the quiet and very professional Belgian driver with a British car. Gerhard Berger, the devil-may-care and volatile Austrian driver in an Italian car. And behind them, Alessandro Nannini, the newcomer to the Benetton team, and a man who's really been impressing a lot of people this season. Very often it's been him that's been leading Boutsen, but it's Boutsen who's very much the team leader here at Montreal. Meanwhile, there's Eddie Cheever fighting off Riccardo Patrese, and the two of them tangle. Through goes Ivan Capelli. Riccardo Patrese keeps going, but even Capelli made up a place there as a no doubt somewhat disgruntled Eddie Cheever regains the tarmac and sets off in pursuit again. Lots of battles going on all the way down the road, all the way down the lap chart in this race. But this is the battle for 3rd place, and Gerhard Berger has now clearly had to forget any hopes he had of staying with those McLarens. All he can now hope for is that he can keep these Benettons behind him, but it looks like a pretty forlorn hope, because here comes Thierry Boutsen up the inside, passes him very neatly, very easily, under braking for the right-hand hairpin, and as they accelerate out, he's a little bit offline, and now Nannini is tacking as well. Alessandro Nannini has the inside line, and it's Nannini who charges up the inside, so both of the Benettons on successive corners pass Gerhard Berger's Ferrari, and Gerhard Berger clearly very unhappy about this, clearly absolutely nothing he can do about it, and so now two Benettons in third and fourth places, two McLarens first and second, with Ayrton Senna once more right up to threaten him, but now one of the Benettons in trouble. That is Alessandro Nannini, and he has shot his bolt, so the glory for both of the Benettons anyway hasn't lasted for very long. We've still got Boutsen third, but out of fourth place goes Alessandro Nannini. He parks the Benetton, off comes the steering wheel, he levers himself out of the car, no doubt very disappointed. So that has promoted Gerhard Berger back to fourth place, with Michele Alboreto up to fifth. Ayrton Senna, meanwhile, has set fastest lap in his efforts to close on Alain Prost as they lap one of the back markers. That is Sala, whom we saw have a pit stop earlier to replace his lost rear wing. Sala in the Minardi keeps out of the way, but now Senna looking very, very threatening indeed as they come up round the right-hander, and through goes Ayrton Senna up the inside of the hairpin, the classic move. Prost gets very close as he tries to fight back, but Senna is through. Ayrton Senna goes through into the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix. He vanquishes his teammate Alain Prost. Senna is through. Prost is still very close. Is he going to try and fight back? He's certainly sitting in the wake of his McLaren teammate, but now as they come past the pits, Senna is inching away, and Ayrton Senna has an increasingly large gap over second man Alain Prost. It looks as though Alain Prost perhaps will settle down now, preserve his car, preserve his fuel, and perhaps gather himself later as we watch the replay. A neat up the inside outbraking manoeuvre. I think that Prost may now decide that he's going to preserve his car, preserve his fuel, and just follow Ayrton Senna and await further developments. A very canny, very patient driver is Alain Prost. This, meanwhile, is the battle between Nelson Piquet in the Lotus, Nigel Mansell in the Williams, and they're now being joined by the very impressive Philippe Streff in the orange-nosed AGS. The little French team have produced a very competitive car this year. Time was when the AGS was the tail end Charlie, but this is the battle for 6th, 7th and 8th places. Nelson Piquet is 6th, with the turbocharged Honda-powered Lotus being pursued not only by the non-turbocharged Judd-powered Williams of Nigel Mansell, his old teammate and rival from last year, but also by the little Cosworth-powered AGS. And that, sadly, is Gerhard Berger. Gerhard Berger out of the race. His Ferrari is parked on the grass away from the track as Nigel Mansell finally gets past Nelson Piquet. Nigel Mansell is past Piquet and into the championship points. And in fact, he will now be promoted to 5th with the retirement of Gerhard Berger as we watch Alain Prost lapping, that's Gabriele Tarquini, in one of the normally aspirated Italian entries, but Alain Prost now some 3.5 seconds down on the leader. That is Nigel Mansell now in trouble. They're falling out like flies. Nigel Mansell with the Judd engine smoking away in the back of his Williams. So what a miserable season it's been for him. Once more, Nigel Mansell will fail to score points, as he has at every Grand Prix this year. And meanwhile, the battle for 5th place, because that's Nelson Piquet in the Lotus. He's now got Philippe Streff on his tail, and behind Philippe Streff in 7th place we've got Andrea de Cesaris in the Real. So both Streff and de Cesaris, both of them from small, low-budget teams, into the pits. Meanwhile comes Eddie Cheever in the Arrows that we saw spin off earlier. Cheever in trouble. A tremendous phalanx of Arrow's mechanics go to his aid, but that looks as though that's a bit serious, and very serious indeed for the fourth placed Ferrari of Michele Alboreto. Both of the Ferraris have now dropped out with smoking engines. A miserable day for Maranello, and still this McLaren domination goes on. First, Ayrton Senna. Second, Alain Prost. Third is still Thierry Boutsen, still leading the normally aspirated cars, and Alain Prost doesn't at this stage seem to be able to do very much about the leader. That's the other Williams in trouble now. Riccardo Patrese comes into the pits with the second of the Williams, so like Ferrari, Williams are going to score no points today. There is the Williams in the pits with the Williams mechanics looking at it, and that's Philip Streff with broken rear suspension. Philip Streff, who was extremely well placed, looked as though he would be in for championship points today. Philip Streff coming into the pits with his left rear suspension broken. The mechanics leap into action. In fact, they're optimistically changing all the wheels, but I think that there's something pretty badly broken at the back, and there's something pretty badly broken inside Piercarlo Ghinzani's engine as Ghinzani brings the Zac Speed to a halt. This is proving to be a real race of attrition here in Montreal, and the problems seem to be attacking almost every team except for the McLarens. And there is Ayrton Senna starting his final lap. He's kept Alain Prost away. He's reeled off the laps. It looks as though he's made his fuel last all the way to the end. A tremendous performance by Ayrton Senna, and after the misfortunes of Monaco and his slightly disappointed second place in Mexico, Ayrton Senna must feel very happy indeed that today, here in Montreal, it's all gone right for him. And Alain Prost, perhaps a little disappointed to come home today with only 6 rather than his customary 9 points. And that's Andrea de Cesaris. Poor Andrea de Cesaris has clearly run out of fuel. He should have got 5th place today for the Real team. He drove excellently well, but on this fuel-thirsty circuit, even though he's not one of the thirstier turbocharged cars, clearly his fuel wasn't enough to get him to the flag. This is Ayrton Senna coming through that long right-hander for the final time. There you see Alain Prost, a glimpse of Prost behind him, which gives you an indication of the gap. Prost in the background as Senna comes on towards the checkered flag now through these last sweeping curves. And it's going to be the third McLaren 1-2 of this year, and it will mean that McLaren will have won every single Grand Prix of the 5 that have run so far this year. A triumphant salute from Ayrton Senna, the checkered flag, and Ayrton Senna wins the 1988 Canadian Grand Prix. His McLaren teammate Alain Prost finishes second, both cars slow at once after crossing the line. Ayrton Senna delightedly acknowledges the cheers of the crowd after what must for him have been a very satisfying day's work. Off comes the crash helmet. He doesn't even look particularly warm. The results then: Ayrton Senna first, Alain Prost second, Thierry Boutsen 51 seconds behind the leader in third place. Nelson Piquet is fourth for Lotus, Ivan Capelli fifth for March, and Jonathan Palmer 2 laps behind.
ideal situation because they will be starting a full lap back, but on the move, and as the lights go to green, Prost is in the lead, and Patrese is coming up right alongside Senna, who closes up on Prost back in second position, and at the hairpin it is Prost, Senna, Patrese and Berger going round in the Ferrari and coming up to take the Williams, and it is still Prost, Senna. Let's see who's through in third position. Is Patrese still in third position? Then it is Berger.
I think there's a little bit of a nudge there at the second corner between Berger and Patrese, and it was well held by Patrese. The back swung out on his car, he caught it well, but to me it's very surprising that Mansell and Nannini went out of the pits at all. I'm sure they would have been better off to have started off, because they can't have been more than halfway around the lap when the race was started. Why they didn't wait in the pits and take it from there, I don't know. I'm also very surprised indeed that a lot more other drivers didn't go straight in, and we gather that Pierluigi Martini also went into the pits and changed onto slicks, because this circuit is going to be in slick conditions. Well, it is already, and the whole of it will be in slick conditions within 2 or 3 laps.
With Prost leading, Senna second, and there out of the race is Martini. So he's changed the tyres, didn't do him very much good. And Sala came in and changed tyres. So the two McLarens, as we would have expected, in the lead. Prost leads, Senna second, Patrese third, Berger in fourth position. Boutsen is up into fifth place in the Williams, and you can see that there is then an enormous gap between the first 5 and the 6th car as the leaders accelerate away, and that's Cathy into the pits for a tyre change. Nannini, who changed his tyres. Prost behind him is leading. Senna is in second place. The two of them pulling away from Riccardo Patrese, who you will see come up in a moment. He is in third position on the Williams, and this is going to be an extremely confusing race. And Senna goes through. Ayrton Senna goes through on the second lap to take the lead from Alain Prost, who goes into the pits. And as I was saying, this is going to be a tremendously confusing race to follow because of the tyre changes.
And I think Prost has done the right thing, and I think Senna will maybe pay for not following him into the pits.
Now, Alain Prost has rejoined the race on the third lap in 17th position, and we will, of course, keep you posted. But how long can Senna keep going? How much of a lead can he build up before his wet weather tyres, with their very heavy tread, overheat and oblige him to come in through a reduction of grip? We are on lap 4 now. Senna leads, Patrese second, Boutsen third. In fourth position it is still Berger, fifth is still Alio. Up into sixth place has gone Jonathan Palmer. So 4 laps will have been completed, and Senna goes in. Lap 4, Ayrton Senna into the pits. Now, there should be, and very probably will be, a change of leader. just Patrese who goes into the lead now, but Alain Prost going to be able to get up? And a scrap on the circuit, which you can see is part dry and part wet, and more dry than wet. Alain Prost is... We're waiting for Prost to come through now, but meantime, the Williams are leading a Grand Prix for the first time in 1989. And Riccardo Patrese, the surprise of 1989, with 2 second places and a record lap in Brazil, is in front as Berger challenges Boutsen and takes that second place from him. Gerhard Berger up into second place. That's the highest he has been this season. Now, this is where the automatic gearbox of the Ferrari could well pay dividends, and you see the McLaren in the background in 4th position, and that gearbox could pay dividends because it is a much smoother change than you get with a manual box, and you can see how Berger on this, the 5th lap, is pulling away from Thierry Boutsen and closing up on Riccardo Patrese. I think before very much longer we're going to see, for the first time since Brazil, a Ferrari in the lead, with this time Gerhard Berger at the wheel rather than Nigel Mansell.
Yes, Berger got himself into the perfect position then. He had the inside of the corner covered.
Gerhard going for the lead. On the 6th lap, we haven't seen him go by. I haven't seen anything on our pictures. And now Ayrton Senna has got a problem because it is raining hard here in Montreal, and he is on slick tyres, whereas the leaders, the first 3, Patrese, Berger and Boutsen, are not.
And that's Gabriel Tarquini, who's off into tyre wall there. The car doesn't look particularly heavily damaged, looks like he just slid it off, and another slitherer we saw there just as we followed the leaders round. And here we see the replay of Tarquini's little brush with the tyre wall. Lost Gerhard Berger, and I don't know where he's gone. We can't see the pits from our commentary position, and there is Gerhard Berger, so he was indeed lost. He was challenging Riccardo Patrese for the lead.
Meantime, Williams-Renault leads. Williams-Renault second. There is the leader. There is his teammate. He being Riccardo Patrese, number 6 in first position, and his teammate being the Belgian Thierry Boutsen in second place. And Senna is still running on slick tyres in very wet conditions, and he surely must be coming into the pits. But in third position, it was Senna until he's gobbled up by somebody, which is going to be happening any moment now, with Derek Warwick up into fourth place.
I think probably what Senna is doing is, having made the change, is hoping that the rain will stop pretty quickly. The circuit still isn't too wet, and hope that he doesn't have to change back. But this race is turning really into a bit of a lottery because the weather is so changeable, it's impossible to predict it, and luck is going to play a very important part in this race, as well as judgment. The fastest lap for Ayrton Senna, which is an important testimony to the conditions, because that tells us that using slick tyres, dry weather tyres in these conditions is definitely the right way to be. So Senna is already on the quickest setup, and he's just taken second place. He has passed Thierry Boutsen, and he certainly pulled away a large amount from him.
Senna is just 4 seconds behind Patrese, and I think he's bound to catch him, because and a tremendous traffic jam. And there's somebody off there. All I can tell you, it's a Minardi. Yeah, it's Sala, Luis Sala, the Spaniard, off.
Marshall just running onto the track to remove some of the debris. He's forgotten a bit of it.
That's a 150-mile-an-hour corner, and he slammed into the barrier very, very hard indeed. But mercifully, it was sideways, and it's raining again. So if Patrese can hang on those wet weather tyres, the gap between himself and Senna, no matter how brilliant Senna is bound to increase. Now there is Cathey, who has passed Alio, and De Cesaris, who is following Alio. The two Delaras and De Cesaris goes through.
Well, this really is a nightmare. I mean, it's raining 1 minute, not raining the next. What do you do? Because 1 minute you've got the flavour of the month if you're on wet tyres. The next minute you've got the flavour of the month if you're on dry tyres.
And off. That's Alio going off. Well, Alio, who crashed in the warm-up, has got problems here. And meantime, Derek Warwick is catching Senna. The gap between them is only 15 seconds now. Patrese has extended his lead over Senna. That you're looking at now in second position to 10 seconds. So there's 25 seconds between Patrese, the leader, Senna, and Derek Warwick in third position. And Senna, you can see he really has got problem. That will be a problem of grip. That's not a driver error, and he hasn't done himself any good picking up the wet there.
Well, it is a driver error, to be fair. I mean, he braked too late, and because in fairness, he knows the conditions are changing all the time, and therefore you have to leave yourself a little leeway, but it was a very small error. He controlled it well, got the car on the move again, and lost probably no more than 2 seconds in that manoeuvre.
Now you're looking at Cathey, De Cesaris and Larini, who are 4th, 5th and 6th. 4th Cathey, 5th De Cesaris, 6th Larini. I wouldn't like to be Cathey, because remember, Phoenix, as Larini goes up to try to take the Dallara, De Cesaris drove into Cathey, and that's Boutsen into the pits. He was in 7th position. Derek Warwick is catching Senna all the time. Race order, lap 20. Patrese 10 seconds ahead as Boutsen goes out on wet tyres, you will notice. Now here is Cathey. You can see how the car, and De Cesaris is through, as you know, 4th, 5th and 6th. Cathey, De Cesaris, Larini going through and up into 5th position. So Larini up into 5th position in the Osella, the 1989 Osella, which his teammate Ginzani was not able to pre-qualify again. And this is and it's raining again. And I saw Warwick dart out of the picture there.
No, Senna has finally gone to the pits. I think Senna made for the pits, and sure enough, there is Senna. So he's finally had to give best and go for wet weather tyres, but being on a fresh set of wets may not be too bad a thing.
Now look at at this. This is Nicola Larini going through to take a place from the Dallara of Andrea De Cesaris, and therefore up into now third position. Temporarily, I may be, because the real fight in this race in terms of wheel-to-wheel combat is between the two Dallaras of Cafe and De Cesaris and Nicola Larini's Osella. And Larini goes past in third position. And that is Roberto Moreno. And the way...
I think that front wheel just fell off. So he'd slowed up because he could feel the wheel wobbling. And in fact, that wouldn't necessarily put him out of the race. He should be able to limp that car rather slowly back to the pits. He'll lose time, but it just looks like they need a new wheel and nut.
Off goes Caffey. That's Alex Caffey going off. What a race of happenings this is.
See the amount of spray being brought up now. Conditions really wet, and so no surprise that we saw Caffey having a little excursion there, because he is clearly on slick tyres or dry weather tyres, and really it's now very definitely wet weather tyre situation. And there we see a spin. Caffey just emerging from yet another spin, and he is one of the ones on slick tyres, and this I think is a testimony to his relative inexperience, because he really should have been in and changed already.
And his team's relative inexperience. Dallara are only in their second full season of Grand Prix racing, the Scuderia Italia, but nevertheless they've made a real mark on Grand Prix racing with an excellent design, the original of which was done by Sergio Rinland, currently with the Brabham team. Race leader, here he is, Riccardo Patrese. It's now lap 26. He has led from lap 4. And it's Warwick in second place. It is Larini in third position. It's Senna in fourth place. It's Arnoux in fifth position. It's Dana in sixth position. And Senna is catching Patrese. And Caffey comes into the pits very definitely on the wrong tyres to take on a set of wets. Well, there have already been more pit stops here in Canada than I should think we've had in all the previous 5 Grand Prix put together. And it's certainly making a dramatic, exciting and interesting race out of it as Boutsen closes on Arnoux, looking for that 5th position. You're soon to see a change as the V10 Renault-powered Williams of Thierry Boutsen comes up to and passes veteran René Arnoux' Ligier with its V8 Ford engine. And unsurprisingly, René Arnoux does not give way. Why should I can hear him saying to himself. But now they're approaching the fastest part of the course. This is where braking is of paramount importance, obviously, as they go through the chicane, past the pits to complete another lap shortly. And this is where Boutsen does get through. Belgian passes Frenchman, Williams passes Ligier. Up into 5th place goes Thierry Boutsen. So the Williams cars of Patrese and Boutsen on this, the 30th lap in this 69-lap race, and backwards into the barrier goes one of the marches just as the picture changes. I can't tell you who it is. Yes, I can. It is Capelli. Capelli has slid in exactly the same place as Gabriele Tarquini went off, and that means to say there's even less runners.
They all know that this is going to be a race of attrition, and he who is still there at the end is bound to have a good chance, and so they should really be driving accordingly. This is one of the times in motor racing where you're not driving at an all-out 10 tenths the whole time. You're trying to take stock of the conditions, trying to take it carefully, and make sure that you're there at the end.
Senna up into third place then by passing Nicola Larini, and sometimes people say to me, why do these Grand Prix drivers get paid such incredible salaries, millions of pounds for the top men? Well, you can see the answer now. Imagine trying to control over 650 horsepower in a very lightweight car on conditions like this, and Riccardo Patrese is now 19 seconds ahead of Derek Warwick in second position. So there's an interesting situation there. 22 seconds between Derek Warwick and Senna. The gaps are closing, and Senna, with Larini there down in fourth place, is the man to watch. I have to say, as of now, that if I was a betting man and had to put money on somebody, I would put it on Ayrton Senna. I remind myself that Riccardo Patrese is still on the original set of wet weather tyres, which will have taken quite a beating earlier on in the race when the track was primarily dry, notwithstanding which he held his lead. But there is Boutsen spinning, a 360-degree spin. Thierry Boutsen coming up to try to pass the Dallara, lost it, but he didn't touch anything, and I have little doubt that he will just have to point it in the right direction, feed in the power, and blast away again. As René Arnoux now, number 25, being chased by Andrea De Cesaris. Well, this could be interesting. René Arnoux, the famous blocker, and Andrea De Cesaris, the famous pusher-offer, fighting for points and positions in the World Championship. I hope we stay with it. René Arnoux.
Absolutely, this is one not to miss, the blocker and the blinker.
And here they come. René Arnoux, and the gap between Patrese and Warwick has been reduced even further, with De Cesaris closing on Arnoux. Warwick is only 12 seconds now behind Riccardo Patrese as De Cesaris bobs about immediately behind Arnoux, but of course it's terribly difficult because the closer he gets, De Cesaris, to Arnoux, the more spray there is to look through, and he's going through.
Not many people get away with that so successfully. So well done, René Arnoux. He got along the inside and got through quite cleanly.
On lap 35 in this 69 lap race, and up into fourth position goes Thierry Boutsen, because you just saw Larini touring there. What a pity, because he was going extremely well, and Osella really do deserve some encouragement. Lap 35, race order. Riccardo Patrese leads, but he's being caught by Warwick. There is Patrese. Into the pits. Warwick is going to take the lead. I was right. Patrese's original set of wet weather tyres have worn. But the race order now is Derek Warwick leading. Up into second place on lap 36 out of 69 goes Ayrton Senna. Down to third position, having changed his wet weather tyres to another set, Riccardo Patrese. Fourth is Thierry Boutsen. In fifth position it is Andrea De Cesaris, and in sixth position it is René Arnoux. So there is Derek Warwick. For the first time since he drove for Renault, he is leading a Grand Prix. Both the Ferraris are out. Alain Prost was out very early on, and the lead is about to change, I think.
Yes, Senna, who's been catching Warwick really hand over fist for the last few laps, some 4 seconds a lap or more. Senna is now poised to bounce, but remember, he won't be in a hurry. The visibility is very poor running in somebody else's spray. He knows how much quicker than Warwick he can go, and he won't want to take any chances. He's driven a mature race and not taking any chances, but he's done that without a chance. He didn't show much patience at all.
3 times world champion Nelson Piquet in the Yellow Lotus, charging to try and catch and get past René Arnoux, who is in 7th place. So Arnoux, with the rear of the Ligier twitching, imagine what it's like in these cars. 650 horsepower behind the drivers, very, very little grip, very light cars, minimum visibility, either because you're driving through a solid wall of spray or because your visor is misted up.
René Arnoux.
And Derek Warwick out. Derek Warwick off course, having led the race and dropped to 2nd position. Now, obviously, out here is a replay of whatever happened. It seems to me he must have lost it, but we'll soon see. No, he just turned straight off the course. What appalling luck when he was higher up than he had been for years.
Yes, what a great shame, because the one thing you don't expect to have in the wet really is mechanical problems, because of course you're not able to use full power for a long time. You can't strain the brakes or transmission in the way that you can on a dry track, and really that is a shame.
Piquet going through to get past René Arnoux, having sized up the Frenchman and where he could get past the Ligier. And now Ayrton Senna has got the same problem, but it should be a lot easier for him because he has got more power, much more power than Nelson Piquet. Last year, both... well, Senna goes through, Arnoux moves over and lets the McLaren through. Race order, lap 42, 69 lap race. Senna leads, Patrese second, Boutsen is in 3rd place. So the Williams-Renault cars, running reliably and strongly, are well up again, only beaten by the single McLaren that is left, with Alain Prost out of the race. In 4th position it is Andrea De Cesaris, and Nelson Piquet is now up into 5th with René Arnoux 6th.
Some of you may be wondering what became of Alain Prost in this race. Well, that's a very good question, because so are we. He disappeared after something like the 3rd or 4th lap of the race, having led the race away from pole position, made his pit stop straight away at the end of the 1st lap, and then a couple of laps later he simply disappeared, and we've had no message as to what became of him. We didn't see his car parked anywhere. He just simply vanished.
And that is Andrea De Cesaris, who is still in that 4th place, and only just in the 4th place, absolutely on the ragged edge, going off almost.
Going off, a fine piece of rallycross there by De Cesaris, rather entertaining. He just seemed to, here we go, and we get a chance to see this masterly piece of rallycross driving yet again. Now he's no longer on the prepared surface, he's grass cutting, But to his credit, at least he kept the car straight, bounced it around a bit, and continues almost with undiminished speed.
Now we're going to see something interesting. Piquet is catching Danner, who is in 8th place. Piquet's 5th, and Danner is the slowest man of these four. And you can see already that Patrese is up with Piquet. Boutsen is up with Patrese. They're all three of them catching Danner. Piquet is passing the German now and is through. Boutsen goes through. Thierry Boutsen up into 2nd place ahead of Patrese. So, Boutsen took his opportunity. You see Piquet taking Danner. This is a replay. You see Boutsen coming up on Patrese, who feeds in the power. Boutsen has got the line and the momentum, goes through and takes 2nd position from Riccardo Patrese on lap 63 in what we expect to be a 68 lap race.
And Senna stopped. Senna is in trouble. And could this be fuel? The speed was marginal for the race. Senna out of the race with only 2 or possibly 3 laps to go.
What a sensational development for the 2nd race in succession. Ayrton Senna retires, but this time in the lead. Thierry Boutsen comes out of the last corner of the last lap to win the Canadian Grand Prix, his first ever victory. Very shortly, he's coming down now, and his heart must be beating wildly because he knows that there's only a few hundred yards left now between himself and not only his first victory, but his first ever 9 points as a result of it. The Williams has, as far as I know, it sounded crisp, and there he goes. Boutsen has won the Canadian Grand Prix. And an exultant wave of the hand, an enormous fillip for Williams and for Renault. Here is Patrese coming in to make it not only first, but also 2nd for Williams and Renault. Patrese's 2nd place in succession. A really superb achievement by this veteran. De Cesaris 3rd, Piquet 4th.